and welcome to Finding Flow Parenting, the podcast where we help you to find more flow, ease, and joy in family life. With me, your host, Emily Hughes, conscious parenting coach and mum of two. Each week, I'll be joined by a special guest to explore a question posed by you, my lovely audience. Expect expansive reframes, tools, self-awareness, and a whole load of empathy. Parenting is a wild ride, but together we've got this. So today I am delighted to be joined by Emma Campani, who is a certified holistic sleep coach, founder of I See the Moon, and she's also a mum of two. She supports families with babies and with older children to navigate sleep challenges in a way that feels responsive, respectful, and rooted in evidence. And Emma and I are also, we've collaborated together on something which is called the Bedtime Battles course. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what's in that, loads and loads of juicy content to help you with your bedtime battles throughout this chat. So thanks so much for being here, Emma.
What a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. So as you know, each week we address a question, and this week's question is a juicy one that I'm sure so many people can relate to. So this is from a parent, and she says, I dread bedtime every night. My 6-year-old child stalls and keeps getting out of bed with worries and questions. I end up snapping because I'm so overwhelmed and desperate for a break. How can I handle bedtimes in a calmer, more effective way? It's a spicy one. So what are your first thoughts when listening to that question?
Yeah, first of all, I feel it. You know, I think we have probably all experienced this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is that I feel so much compassion and empathy for that parent. Bedtime can be the point in the day where we are completely touched out, we're overstimulated, we're running on empty. Either we have been with our children all day, or we have been at work and then picked them up from childcare, and then it's kind of like straight into dinner and evening routine. And bedtime is when we are almost at the time that we can just like whoosh, and have our own time. So when a child keeps coming out with worries or questions or stalling tactics or even, huge behavior, it's very, very human to feel what this parent is feeling.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that you say it's very, very human. Because sometimes I think, and I really felt this reading that question. Sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves because, we know that in order for a child to go to sleep, they need a calm environment. But if we feel like we're on fire in our nervous system, it's really, really hard to bring that calm environment. And I love what you said there about like just the sensory aspect to it, like being touched out, being overstimulated. And what would you say to someone who is, what do you think are maybe the barriers in the way that are stopping people from changing this dynamic?
I'm thinking about what comes up at bedtime for that child. Bedtime represents a huge separation from us, from their favorite people, from their safest people in the whole world. And it can also often be the first quiet point in their day where it's kind of calm and quiet enough for all of their kind of worries or chatter to surface. So I think the first helpful thing that I can say with bedtime battles, the first thing that we can do as parents, if we are struggling with bedtime, is look after our own needs first. Meet our own needs first before bedtime has started. And by that, I mean really simple, basic needs. Are we thirsty? Are we hungry? Do we need the toilet? Are any of our clothing or hair or like any accessories, are they uncomfortable? Change into your PJs or comfies. and do all of that before you even think about starting bedtime. Like, that's the first thing.
Yeah, and I remember you saying this from our course that we did together. It sounds so basic,
I
but when
know.
I'm doing solo bedtime, I really have started doing that thing of getting changed into my pajamas. And it's even just the symbolic aspect of it, is in like, I'm going to look after myself for a minute. Because so often it's that time of day when we just feel like we're just sort of in service, like we're just being tugged. All of the energy has been taken out of us. I'm really enjoying at the moment is how can I protect my energy?
I love that.
And it's just a really simple self-tending is protecting your energy, because it's almost taking this energy that you've been giving all day, just giving a little bit of it back to yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, once you think parents have done that, and I mean that's an ongoing thing. I think I feel like we can never have enough of that, tending to our own needs. Yeah, well, one of the things I think can be really, really helpful, I mean, I think this is universally helpful, is to look at things from the perspective of the child. Because so often what we can get stuck in is we want progress, and then our child is getting in the way of that progress. And then sometimes our nervous system can be going into like threat, and things can get really sticky when we stop looking at the child, as fully human, and we start looking at them as like a threat to our progress, which I think is a really natural thing that ends up happening when we're depleted. So how do you think we can kind of like shift that and start looking at things a bit more from the child's perspective and what's going on for them?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think what feeds into that, one of the biggest things that feeds into that is the worry that we are, or our children are not meeting societal expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest kind of myths around sleep for infants, toddlers, and children is that they should be sleeping independently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the worry of that potentially not happening,
Yeah.
because a child needs connection and safety and our support to fall asleep, which, by the way, is so very normal and like okay to be doing. It does not hinder sleep. I think the
Mm-hmm.
worry that that is not happening can feed into that, I need this shouldn't be happening, and therefore I'm in kind of panic mode. I'm in fight or flight because I'm doing something wrong, and my child isn't where they should be
Yeah.
based on these societal expectations and worries. So I think just letting go, that's so much easier said than done, but
Yeah.
letting go of the expectation that a child should be doing something. I mean, in this case, obviously, we're talking about falling asleep independently.
Yeah.
Letting go of that and almost leaning into, okay, this is where my child is. They need me to fall asleep, and that is okay. So that automatically just kind of like releases so much pressure on our shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can lean into that, I think that really lets go of a lot of the worry at bedtime in our own kind of bodies and our minds.
Yeah, and it's really when we get to that state of feeling more centered and grounded that we can actually create an environment more conducive to sleep. I think that
Yeah.
that word should is such a barrier to ease, flow, and joy in our lives. Because when we are stuck in that should, it's really good to label that as conditioned thinking.
Yeah, totally.
Every time should comes up, it's conditioned thinking, and it's shame-based thinking as well. And it takes away from the truth, exactly as you say, the truth of, well, where is my child actually at right now? And when you embrace and accept all of that, it's a little bit like, well, from that base, now we can build some skills. Now we can nudge forward. But if we're stuck in that should, it's like being stuck in like a shame hurricane. And it's really, really
Yeah.
hard to not be reactive.
Yeah, 100%. And, we've got to also remember that children are not able to regulate their own emotions. We co-regulate. So they borrow our calm. And so if we are not calm, now this is not to add pressure to parents, because being calm at bed, like at bedtime is, as we've already discussed, it can be really difficult. But if we already know that we have a focus on keeping ourselves calm and making sure that we're looked after so that we can create that calm environment to co-regulate our children, I think even starting there can make a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things as well, in that was around if a child is having an active brain at night,
Oh,
if they're
yeah.
coming to you with questions, if they're coming to you with worries. And this is definitely something I experience with my eldest child. It can feel extremely draining and it can poke at your unmet need for progress and efficiency. And yeah, what would you say around that? If the child is unable to sleep because their brain is active and they're coming to the parent with worries or fears, it's a really hard one to manage because we want to be empathetic. But as we've already established, sometimes empathy doesn't feel like it's available to us if we're in this rigid, overstimulated place.
I think if your child is prone to doing that, you're going to have to need to build that into the bedtime routine. You're going to have to create some space for that to happen if that is what your child needs to be able to fall asleep. So, an example is that my eldest has a busy brain at bedtime. He has lots of thoughts roaming around. And so we do a thing that he calls chatses. And it's basically having a chat. And we've kind of it's kind of evolved and restructured over the last few years. And it's chatses and questions. So he can have 3 questions and I can ask him 3 questions. And it can be honestly about anything. What's your favorite animal? Like, as a basic one. But what do you think that the animal is, anything about the animal kingdom, both of my kids love, but anything that your child is, into, really kind of focus in on, it doesn't have to be about worries because they will come up naturally. Creating a space for just talking, even for kind of like a week or 2, just having that space that's guaranteed for them. If there are worries, they will come up naturally. So you don't have to kind of like focus and probe. It's just a really calm section of bedtime where you're just chatting. And I think that can be really, really helpful. Also, things like meditation stories, the Yoto is something that we have, but I know there's like Tony's and other things that children love. And I actually use a story that you gave me, the sorting squirrel.
Oh, nice.
I've evolved that for my 2 and they absolutely love it.
Yeah. And I think, with my eldest, we do a version of that too, that we call it venting time.
Oh, that's nice.
It basically sounds like this. I say, what are your likes and dislikes at the moment? And he's 9, so he's a bit older, and he will just list all of the things that are terrible in his life because that's what being a 9-year-old is like. And, very high drama with everything. And, I just say, like, I repeat back what he said, and then I say, tell me more. And then I repeat back what he said, and then I say, tell me more. And then it gets to this point where he sort of runs out of things to say. And then I feel like, okay, this is closed now. But I think creating these spaces for children to share these things so that they're not then lying down at night and that's the first time they've had to introspect, to reflect upon their day. They've had a chance to do that and be co-regulated by you. And then I think also for me, and I know this to be true from some of my clients too, is a bit of trust. It's like trusting that if you have created that space and then the child is still wanting more, it's a question of like enoughness. How can I trust that this is enough? And then it's like, okay, well, I feel comfortable now to set a boundary here that I'm not willing to keep on going with this. I'm not willing to keep on answering questions and talking about things because now it's time for bed. And it can give you that security to hold that boundary because you know that your child's needs are going to be predictably met. And that's a really important question that I've been talking a lot with my clients about, which is like, how do I know when something is enough? And I feel like our culture almost wants us to say, well, nothing's ever enough, putting us in this sort of scarcity mindset. We're always having to do more, more, more. But actually trusting if you've created that solid routine, if you've created a safe, calming environment where your child's feelings have been held safely, then that's enough.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
it's really important.
100%. I think confidence in holding boundaries is something that I find a lot of the families that I work with struggle with too. And it's hard. Like holding a boundary is really hard. Being firm and continuing to hold the boundary, even when your child is pushing against it. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think that's why having kind of, to use our example, the 3 questions, that is a boundary because it's numbered. There's a limit. So that can be really helpful to start there. Or if you have, a clock, you can say, let's chat for, 5-10 minutes. That can be really helpful too, because there's an ending to it so that it helps you set the boundary and hold the boundary if that's something that, you're really struggling with.
Yeah. And I think what you say there, so often we think of boundaries as being things that have consequences attached to them, but sometimes the most powerful boundaries are just the boundaries that are set by a consistent, predictable routine.
Yeah.
Because the boundaries are always there, whether you're aware of them or not, because boundaries are just kind of guardrails to how we flow the energy in our home. And having a predictable routine, if things like you say, I'm only answering 3 questions, this predictability creates the boundary.
Yeah, and there's safety in predictability, right? So
Yeah.
we know from studies that a bedtime routine that is age appropriate, predictable, and soothing does equate to better overnight sleep. So, and we also know that this is dose dependent. So the more you do that predictable bedtime routine, the better it will work. So, and little ones find comfort and safety in predictability, and that's why it's key to have a bedtime routine that does the same things in similar things in the similar order every night. And that also, like you said, helps with the boundary because it's predictable. They know what's coming, they know where it ends, and that just kind of helps everyone to maintain the structure of things that then helps them flow into sleep, right? Because that's the aim of a bedtime routine, is that at the end of it they will flow into sleep. So yeah, I totally agree with that. The predictability is a big factor, an important one.
Yeah, and I think, if you've got a solid routine, let the routine do the heavy lifting.
100%.
So
Yeah.
that you don't have to do so much heavy lifting. And another thing within that is it's much easier to control the environment than it is to control the child. So often I see parents really hyper focusing on how can I control the child? How can I modify the child's behavior? And it's actually, that's the hardest thing. And sometimes it's even kind of the impossible thing, because
Yeah.
one thing is absolutely certain when it comes to control: you don't have any control over when your child actually goes to sleep. You can't force a child to go to sleep. And this is perhaps why bedtime is so triggering, because before we became parents, we were largely in control of our lives. We got to say how things went. We got to determine the flow of our day. And then, 2 core things that are true is that you cannot force a child to eat and you cannot force a child to sleep. And this is why bedtime is so triggering, particularly for people who thrive on order and control.
Yeah.
What would you add to that?
No, nothing. Like you you've said it all. That lack of control is so triggering. And that can feed into our kind of like trying to rush through the bedtime. But like I kind of mentioned before, that with the co-regulation, because we co-regulate and because they need to borrow our calm to be calm themselves, they are absolute masters at picking up on our energy. So if we are bringing that kind of like trying to rush to get to the end of bedtime, they are picking up on that and they will stall. They will feel it and they will be like, no, but I don't want to get to the end of bedtime because this is my connection time. And then it's separation. Then I'm not with you. And then and then I've got to sleep. And so they will automatically and almost subconsciously stall even more. So it all, like, that lack of control is massive. And I feel it too, it just kind of reiterate, like, I am not, just because I'm a holistic sleep coach, I'm also human and I'm also a mum of two very energetic little boys. And, bedtime is not always perfect in my house, just to reassure you. But we do have a solid bedtime routine. And you're right, bedtime, the bedtime routine there's so much power in it. It's so powerful. And it can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you if you have all of the elements in your bedtime routine that are what your individual child needs in order for them to be ready to wind down for sleep.
Yeah. And it kind of strikes me as well in bedtime that often children can feel quite disempowered within bedtime because, like you say, a child's primary need is for attachment to you. And there's this looming separation about to happen, and they can feel that. And that stalling makes so much sense. It's a child being opportunistic, and it's a child fighting for their primary survival need, which is attachment. And when we look at it like that, they're not being difficult on purpose. They're being difficult because they're trying to stretch out that attachment to you. And when we look at it like that, whilst it can be extremely frustrating, it just allows us to have a little bit more generosity towards the child. And I wonder, how do you think, so we've spoken about creating space for the worries and things like that. How do you think we meet that need for attachment?
There's actually loads of lovely ways that we can add in little bits of connection throughout the evening and during the bedtime routine, because the connection is often what little ones and bigger ones are seeking at bedtime. So listening, that's connection. Listening to their worries, listening to what they have to say, that is connection. Maybe giving them something of yours to hold or sleep with overnight, that is so powerful. I have done that for both of my children, actually. And it can be even something simple as like a scrunchie that they know that you love, something that is important to you, that you are trusting them to look after overnight. It can be things like leaving a little note on their bedside table once they go to sleep, so that when they wake up in the morning, they can see that you have been into their room. And, they can feel that kind of connection. And with the consistency of doing that and the predictability of doing that, they will know as they're going to sleep, oh, my mum or my dad is going to come in and they're going to leave me this little note, or I don't know, like a little Lego thing or anything, something that your child is into. And they kind of they know that is happening, and that's already a way of connection, of creating connection. And going back to what you were saying about, children potentially being opportunistic at bedtime, they also have a huge sense of a need for autonomy and control themselves, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of our kids' lives are, bless them, out of their control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether they're at nursery or at school, even kind of like getting dressed in the morning, they've got to wear their uniform. Like, there's just so much that's out of their control. And often giving them lots of opportunities for asserting their their control and their choices, giving them lots of options to make choices throughout the evening and at bedtime can really help with that, can really lessen the kind of like pushing against the boundaries. Because if you're filling their autonomy up, then they're less likely to feel like they need to push against boundaries to kind of carve out that autonomy for themselves.
We want to create a situation where bedtime is happening with them, not to them.
Totally.
It's really important. So great. I've loved this chat. Emma and I have a course called Bedtime Battles Solution, which we will share in the show notes. And it's basically 6 modules with loads and loads of practical tools, but also your personal growth within that too, because you're a leader at bedtime as the parent. And, as we've established in this conversation, we need to be feeling as solid and sturdy as possible. So it's a mix of both those things, support for you as the parent, but also like practical tools and things like, the bedtime stories and things like that sort of therapeutic stories and things like that. What would you add to that, Emma?
There's also, of course, looking at, you mentioned practical things, but like things like sleep hygiene. Looking at the timing of bedtime. Is that right for your child? Could that be playing a factor? And so, looking at it from a sleep perspective and also, a nervous system perspective for yourself as the parent and also for your child. There's loads of stuff in there, and it's videos of us chatting you through the modules, and there's kind of extra bits like Emily mentioned, therapeutic stories and some connection activities that you can do with your child, and loads of bits in there.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been lovely chatting with you as always.
Thank you so much for having me, and lovely to chat to you too.